In the ancient fortress city of Suwon, where the great walls of Hwaseong still stand guard over history, there lies a well that has been sealed for over 2 centuries. Local people call it jeoju badeun umul, the cursed well, and they speak of it only in whispers. For those who listen too closely to its depths might hear voices that should have been silenced long ago. This well was not always a place of terror. Once, it was a pride of a wealthy merchant named Lee Sang-min, who built his grand Hanok estate near the fortress walls. During the reign of King Jeongjo, the well was dug deep into the earth, its water pure and sweet, surrounded by beautiful carved stones, and shaded by ancient badeun willow trees. But prosperity breeds envy, and Sang-min's wealth had been built on the suffering of others. He was a cruel landlord who demanded impossible rents, a moneylender who charged rates that strangled poor. And when drought came to the region in the year 1795, he hoarded grains while his tenants starved. Many came to his gate begging for mercy, for grains to feed their children, for water from his abundant well, when their own had run dry. But Sang-min turned them all away, setting his servants to guard the well with clubs and knives, declaring that every drop belonged to him alone. Among those who suffered most was a young mother named Bak Sun-hee, whose husband had died in the king's service, leaving her alone with 3 small children. For days she had walked from well to well, finding only mud and stones, while her youngest child, little Minsu, grew weaker from the thirst and fever. "Please, Sang-min 어른," she begged at his gate one scorching afternoon, her baby crying weakly in her arms. "Just 1 bucket of water. My child is dying. I'll work for nothing. I'll give you anything, but please have mercy." But Sang-min looked at her with cold eyes, adjusting his expensive silk durumagi coat, and laughed cruelly. "Your suffering is not my concern, woman. If your child dies, that's 1 less mouth to drain resources from this world. Go away before I set the dogs on you." That night, driven by desperation and the sound of her dying child, Suni crept over the estate wall like a shadow. She moved silently through the garden, past the sleeping guards, until she reached the well. The moon was dark, and the only sound was the gentle splash of the bucket as she drew up the sweet, life-giving water. But as she lifted the bucket to her lips, ready to drink deeply before carrying water home to her children, a hand grabbed her shoulder. Sang-min himself stood there, his face twisted with rage, a heavy club in his other hand. "Thief!" he snarled. "Stealing what belongs to me? I warned you what would happen." Before Suni could speak, could beg for mercy, could explain that her child was dying, he struck her with the club. She fell backward, the precious water spilling from the bucket, and her head struck the stone rim of the well with a sickening crack. Blood ran dark in the moonlight, mixing with the spilled water, and Suni lay still. Sang-min stood over her body, breathing heavily, realizing what he had done. But instead of remorse, instead of calling for help, his first thought was of his reputation, his standing in the community. "No one can know," he whispered to himself. "No one can ever know." He lifted Sun-hee's lifeless body and threw it into the deep well, listening to the splash echo up the darkness. Then he covered the well with heavy stones and told his servants that it had run dry, that they must find water elsewhere. But the well do not forget the blood that stained their waters, and the dead do not rest quietly. when they die with just unserved. That very night, as Sangmin tried to sleep, he heard it for the first time. A voice calling up from the sealed well, faint but unmistakable. 물을 주세요. Water. Please give me water. He told himself it was the wind, or perhaps a cat, caught somewhere in the walls. But the next night the voice came again, and the night after that, each time clearer, each time more desperate. 상민아, 왜 나를 죽였어? 상민, why did you kill me? 내 아들이 목이 말라 죽어가고 있어. My children, they're dying of thirst. 물, 한 방울만. Water, just one drop. Night after night, the voice grew stronger, and soon Sangmin realized he was not alone in hearing it. His servants began to whisper among themselves, speaking of strange sound from the sealed well, of shadows moving in the garden at midnight, of the smell of stagnant water that followed them everywhere. One by one, they began to leave his service, making excuses about sick relatives or better opportunities elsewhere. But Sangmin knew they were fleeing from the voice, from the presence that grew stronger each night. As the weeks passed, the voice was joined by others. Suni had not been Sangmin's only victim. Over the years, his cruelty has driven many to desperation, to death by starvation, disease, and despair. Now their voices rose from the well together, a chorus of the wronged dead, demanding justice. 우리를 기억해. Remember us. 우리의 고통을 느껴라. Feel our suffering. 내가 우리에게 한 일을 같아라. Pay for what you did to us. The voices came not just at night now, but during the day as well. Sangmin would be eating his rice and suddenly taste salt water and mud. He would reach for his tea and find the cup full of dark, brackish liquid that reeked of death and decay. Friends and neighbors began to avoid him, disturbed by his haggard appearance, his constant muttering to voice only he could hear clearly, his habit of staring at the sealed well for hours, as if expecting something to emerge from beneath the stones. Please, he would whisper to the well during his sleepless nights. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to kill her. It was an accident. What do you want from me? But the voices only grew louder, more insistent, more numerous. Every person who had suffered because of his greed, every child who had died because of his hoarding, every widow left destitute by his cruelty, all of them spoke from the dark water below. On the anniversary of Sune's death, Sangmin could bear it no longer. The voices had become so loud that he could hear nothing else, a constant chorus of accusation and demand for justice. His hair had turned white, his hands shook constantly, and he had not slept in weeks. In the depth of his madness, he began to believe that only way to silence the voices was to give them what they wanted. He staggered out to the well at midnight, removed the heavy stone with superhuman strength, born of desperation, and peered down into the black water far below. The water was not still. It moved and churned, as if something massive withered beneath its surface. And faces appeared in his dark mirror. Dozens of faces, all looking up at him with eyes full of accusation and hunger. Come down to us, Sangmina. Sune's voice called from the depths, clearer now than it had ever been. Come down and join us. Feel what we felt. know what we know. The water is so cold, so dark, so lonely. But you'll have company here. All of us are waiting for you. Without thinking, without resistance, Sangmin climbed over the stone rim, and he let himself fall into the darkness. The cold water closed over his head, like the judgment of heaven itself, and his scream was lost in the splash that echoed through the night. The next morning, his servants found the well uncovered, and their master nowhere to be found. They called for help, and when the authorities arrived with ropes and lanterns, they found the well deeper than anyone remembered. Its water black and foul-smelling, with no bottom that their lights could reach. But Sangmin's death did not end the curse. The voices from the well continued, now joined by his own, calling out to anyone who passed too near. The East Day was abandoned. The Hanok house fell into ruins, and the well was sealed again, this time with prayer and protection charms by the local mudang shaman. Yet, even now, more than 2 centuries later, those who live near the old site report strange sounds. On the nights when the moon is dark, children are warned never to play near the sealed well, for sometimes, when the wind is still and the city noise fades, you can hear them calling from far below. They say if you put your ear to the ground above the well on the anniversary of that terrible night, you can hear them still, all of them together, the voices of those who died for want of water, for want of mercy, for want of simple human kindness. 물을 주세요. Water, please give us water. 우리를 잊지 마세요. Don't forget us. 우리의 이야기를 전해주세요. Tell our story. So ends the tale of Suwon's haunted well, a story of greed that drowns compassion, cruelty that echoes through centuries, and the voices of the wronged dead, who will not rest until justice is served. Some say that on certain nights, when you're walking alone through the old parts of Suwon, you might hear the sound of water dripping, where no water should be, or catch the whisper of voices, calling for mercy that came too late. Listen carefully to what they tell you. Remember their names, their suffering, their unfulfilled need for simple human kindness. For in a world where the powerful still prey upon the weak, where the wealthy still hoard what the poor needs to survive, these voices serve as a reminder that cruelty leaves marks that never fade, that injustice creates echo that never die, and that sometimes the dead have longer memories than the living.